The podcast today is episode number 5 of the Service Without Excuses podcast, season 1, where we talk to real-world service business professionals about what they're doing every day to make a difference, not only in their customers' and clients' lives, but also in their staff. Every week, we interview those that make critical differences, the challenges, the strategies, and the triumphs. Our mission is to change the beliefs that were holding us back in our business. Our purpose is to exchange strategic ideas to help each other grow. Our values are to reflect honesty, integrity, discipline, structure, equaling results. Short-term goal is to destroy limiting beliefs that are preventing true success. Our long-term goal is to grow and build an actual business, not a ticking time bomb. Final result is to make you enjoy what you do every day, every time. Welcome to the Service Without Excuses podcast. Hey guys, welcome to episode number 5 of the Service Without Excuses podcast. We're glad to be with you here today to record a brand new episode. This one is a question that I've gotten coaching and consulting people over the years, and it's a common question, mostly because of my background. People know when they hire me that it's what's the advantages and disadvantages. I know, Rob, you talk and you spent 17 years with franchise businesses, but you never physically owned one. You ran them, you operated them, but you never actually physically owned one. All true. There are major advantages and there are major disadvantages, and franchising has changed a lot with the advent of the internet and a lot of information that's, for the most part, pretty good out there that I found. It's a open playground, so to speak, when it comes to growing and building your business today. So you don't necessarily have to do a franchise like you did years ago. It was kind of the requirement if you're going to open a business. That was the way you went first and foremost. If you could get one, if you could afford to get one, if you could afford to get one in your market, there were tremendous advantages to it. It's not quite the same today. There are, again, many different variations of what you can and can't do. So I want to welcome you to the brand new episode of Service Without Excuses podcast. Again, episode number 5. Now, some of the big advantages to this, and we're going to, again, stick just to service-based businesses. I'm not going to get into restaurants and coaching franchises and real estate franchises, even though real estate is a portion of what we do. I'm going to get into advantages more or less and discuss the pieces of it related to what we do as service providers. So we'll go with 5 of the best advantages that I have on the list here. Much of the work is done for you to launch a business already done. So let's just say I own a carpet cleaning business, tile and grout cleaning business. We do some paver work and things like that, upholstery cleaning. If I did not come from this business, buying a franchise that would teach me a system and a process to do it would be vital. If I just said, you know what, I hear this is a good business to get into, low receivables for the most part, mostly a cash business, cash not meaning you get paid cash, but that you're being paid that day. You're not holding a receivable note. You're not having this large A&R out there, accounts receivable report. The cash is in hand that day. So there are advantages to that. There's systems and processes in place, and these are huge. And coming from 17 years of that, it was the prerequisite prior to maybe around 2005, 2008, it started to change a lot. 2005 was still a good time to really get involved in most franchises when it came to our industry, cleaning, restoration, HVAC, real estate, pest control, things like that. It became where you would want to buy that because of the reputation. And also a big part of it is resale value. So if you take the business and you run it for the life of the franchise agreement, most of the time franchises have agreements for 10 years. You can renew it for another 10 years, usually 20 years max, and then an evaluation is done. Some of them don't really care. They're good with just keeping it as long as you're good with it. But most have a 10-year requirement, and then you re-up after 10 years. So the advantages to that are resale value. Let's stick to that one right there. If you're building up a business and the business does, let's say, $500,000, let's be modest about it. It's a very good number for any service business to do, a multi-truck company, in most of what we do. The value to the new buyer is there's already systems and support and things in place. If the owner walks away and he has to walk away for health issues or doesn't want to have anything else to do with it, anything at all when it comes to the business, the major advantage right there is that they don't have to do much. They could just follow the systems, policies, and procedures, operation procedures, things of that nature, and really just run with it. So if they're an aggressive entrepreneur and they're ready to roll with it, it's probably a good thing because you have that support. That person that's going to invest in your franchise or your business is not going to want to do a lot of the legwork. Devil's advocate to that. If the business has systems, has structure in place, longevity, policies, procedures, employee manuals, operational manuals, operational systems in place, you're already 3/4 of the way there. So if you can spend a couple months on with the new owner, you can avoid that. But that's the rare, that's the few, not the norm. Most businesses don't have those things in place in order to do it. They don't have manuals like you see behind you that detail every function of the business, that if you're not here, that it can be done and there's something in place to do it. I would not know how to function a business without an operations manual. When I started a business, my first day of my company with just me, I built an operations manual. I built an employee manual. I built multiple employee manuals for different companies over the years, in parallel with attorneys and things like that to make everything legal in each market. But that's the rare, but you can't do it. Today, with all the information that's out there, you can buy business systems, business in a box, as they call it. You can buy things that'll point you in the right direction without necessarily paying a large, royalty fee. We'll get into those things later on. But there is a lot of that, what they call heavy lifting has been done. If you decide to buy a franchise, it's got those things in place. So that work is done for you. Again, the other side of it is if you put the time into it, learn it, hire a coach, hire a mentor, buy a business in a box, get some real mentoring, so to speak, from the right people. You can get a lot of that information online today. There's a lot of great forums out there in every trade that'll teach you how to do it. I know a few of them out there. Truckbound Forums has an academy that they have individual videos and I guess ride-along programs. There's a few people that do that. And for the carpet and tile cleaning business, and I think even they get into pest control and stuff like that, they can teach you how to do it. They've been doing it very successfully for years. So there are ways to go around that and go through those academy things and learn from that standpoint. You are going to still put an investment out into it, a substantial one, but you're not paying a continuous royalty fee onto it. So the advantages are the heavy lifting's been done. The work has already been done as far as successful systems of operation that go. The negative point is you can get that information out there a lot today, hiring the right coach, consultant, training program, ride-along program. Even if you get a mentor in a different area you don't compete against, they could probably help you too as well. An advantage to, again, buying a franchise is you don't need much experience. They have things in place in order to do every part of the business for the most part. They should have every detail, what to do with employee meetings, what to do with human resources issues, what to do with marketing, what to do with tracking, and what to do with sales training. All these different parts that are important to a sales or service-based business is you have to have those things. Flow, scheduling. You can, again, as we talked in some of the other ones, buy CRM programs with a little bit of training and a little bit of time into it that can guide you. One of the big advantages to franchises years ago is they were the only ones that had, for the most part, those operational CRM programs, and now that's different. So with a little bit of training on those programs, that can kind of guide you too as well into it. So the plus to buying a franchise is you don't need really an experience. If you're going to buy a restaurant, which doesn't relate to this, they need an operating partner most of the time. Somebody's actually done it, even if you don't know how to do it or haven't done it. That's a big part of it. But again, you can get that training from other places. Support from a larger network of businesses. So in a franchise, you have different territories. Now, if you're I know one particular carpet clean franchise is where to me, they oversell the territory. They claim to be the world's largest franchise of carpet cleaning services. And I'm sure that's true, that probably they are the world's largest by volume of number of franchisees out there. I don't think sales volume probably would affect it, but it's possible that they have the largest number of that. One of the disadvantages to that is the territory is not necessarily protected. Now, they phrase it a little bit different than this. They take it as almost a McDonald's approach. If you have a McDonald's on one street and a McDonald's down the block, a quarter of a mile, that it's going to be saturation and people are going to see the name. They're going to want to do business with more people over and over again. And some truth to that. I mean, depending on your business model, there is some truth to that. I don't think for service-based businesses that's necessarily true. And my reason for it is I feel you have to have a protected territory. I feel you want to butt up to another territory that might in particular have some experience, have some market share in that particular market. That's great. Years ago, I looked at actually buying a carpet cleaning franchise, a low moisture one. And the gentleman that had the territory up next to me seemed very nice in the beginning, and it got a little, I'm not sure, I think he wanted to buy the territory, just kind of feeling me out to see what I was going to do. But I wanted to do a co-op with him. And a co-op is, I buy this territory, and that particular territory was Luzerne County in Pennsylvania to start with. And I wanted Luzerne and actually Lackawanna, which is Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, if anybody's from that area. This particular gentleman was in the Poconos and went a little bit south, but he was in that area and he'd done very well with it. But I think he had his eyes on going into the Lackawanna County area, and he wanted to feel me out. But originally we talked about doing a co-op, which means we're going to co-op marketing efforts to help each other build. It's kind of like a I help you, you help me type of routine. It's a coexistence when it comes to marketing and positioning and branding your business, if you go that way. We both invest in TV ads because independently it's very difficult for us to do it. So if we put a bigger pot of money together, we can invest in things. We can co-op on, at the time, print advertisements. We can co-op on different businesses. If I get a franchise chain or a multi-location and they have 3 or 4 locations of commercial structures in my territory, they might have 2 or 3 in his. Now I'm able to help him out with that. Vice versa, he can do the same thing for me. So there's very good, from that standpoint, to be able to reach out to that network of companies. And if you're within that particular brand, that particular franchise, then you can reach out to those different companies that don't necessarily, for the most part, compete, with rare exception to it. And you can get advice from them and they can help you out. You get a big job, and let's just say in disaster restoration in your franchise, and you've got this big school that's flooded and you only have 3 trucks and your job requires 10, you can co-op essentially or joint venture with the other franchise partner and go together in on this job that you wouldn't probably be able to do individually, but you can do collectively because you're part of this organization. And it makes it simple because it's one name, one company. You're not saying it's Jim's Restoration and I got Jim Bob's Restoration, Joe's Restoration, James Restoration. You're not dealing with 5 different companies. So there is an advantage when it comes to the perceived value from the consumer, the customer standpoint, that you're dealing with one company and one company that's abiding by the same rules, same training, same billing, essentially, even though it's 2 different ones. It can be built through a corporate account, or it can be built through each franchise individually and split, or, there's a variety of ways you can do that. So there are some real advantages. Now, the opposite side of the coin. If you build a network of people around you that do what you do, in particular, New Jersey's Best has a network of other people that do what we do around us. Some very good, some better at things than even we are. For that reason, they get the referrals. For instance, I have a friend in my market, a friend and a competitor, and if I get wood floor restoration jobs, I have 2 people I can refer. One is very, very good, and that's all he does, but he's very, very expensive, and you're going to wait a while to get him. Tremendous. On the other option, this gentleman does a great job, reasonable price, not cheap by any means, but reasonable price, but can usually get it done much faster because he has crews in place that specialize in just that area. Well, I don't do those things. I might clean wood floors. I might recoat wood floors, but I don't sand the wood floors. So I have the ability to network with that person. That person gets a large water damage job he can't get in. I don't do water damage jobs, but if he needs us to extract water under his flag, I can certainly come out there and help him. I can't do it under my visa. That's not what we do. It's not what we're necessarily licensed to do or insured to do. But I can help with that because I'm going under his flag. And certainly I've done disaster restoration for 25 years, so I do understand how to do it. you have the ability to do that with another person to help them out. They get a big enough job, they can't do it themselves. They need extra hands. Then you get all hands on deck. Everybody helps and splits a little bit of the pie. Usually the majority goes to the person that has it, and then splits from there, with rare exception, but it does happen from time to time. Ability to buy collectively together. This is the biggest advantage, in my opinion, to a franchise, and the biggest disadvantage to non-franchises. So there's different networks of groups. There's franchises, there's business opportunities, there's systems, there's networks, there's all these different things. Franchises are typically something that's based on percentage or a flat royalty fee. If you're in disaster restoration, it's probably royalty. If you're in carpet cleaning, it's for the most part going to be royalty. But there are some that are just flat fee per month, no matter what you do. If it's $450, that's what you're doing, just the $450 itself. But sorry about that. If it's just that itself, then it's fine. But it depends on what the situation is. Depends on what you're doing. So everything is a little bit different. But in that case, you're saving usually much of your royalty, if not all of your royalty, in buying power. So because let's just say you belong to a franchise and you're in the restoration field, you want to buy dehumidifiers. Dehumidifiers might cost the average person over the block, might cost them, I don't know, $1,500 to $2,000 per dehumidifier, maybe a little bit more. But through national buying power, you might save a few $100s on each piece of equipment. So a dehumidifier that cost you $2,000 from one place might cost you $15 through a franchise. Well, if you're saving $500 per dehumidifier, that's a lot. That comes a lot off your royalties every single month. You could save thousands of dollars every single month, therefore justifying the need to pay a royalty because you're saving on national buying power. Same thing with networks, same thing with groups, same thing with different professions, same thing with a lot of different things. You're able to save on that bulk issue. Maybe not quite as much you're saving because a franchise might have bigger buying power, bigger volume, bigger sales. Therefore, they get the better deal. But you're still going to get a good deal if you belong to a network. I belonged to a network years ago in the disaster restoration field. I loved it. And one of the key advantages was dealing with two great vendors, Chad in one part of the country out west. And then we had a national kind of franchise type basis where you can go and have national buying power. You just went in and said, you went online to a set up website and you put in your company ID and you're a part of this program and you could buy that piece of equipment for, much less than you would do. Maybe not as much of a savings as sometimes I think you might even save as much, if not more. It just depends on what you're buying and who you're buying it from. But very similar situation. So there is a tremendous advantage to belonging to a franchise and network, a business opportunity, licensing program, whatever that happens to be. That's crucial. Having that buying power is crucial to grow your business, especially when you're in the growth stage. Chuck Violin, one of the most brilliant business minds in the restoration field, most brilliant business mind, I think, in any business, described one time in a presentation he did the 3 ships of a business. And it was different levels of business. It would say, here's a rowboat when you start, because that's pretty much all you got is the rowboat. You got the little thing going on. And then as you go, you've got now a sailboat, with some traction, get some wind, maybe a little outboarding thing. And then it goes up to a ship, a small ship, not even a ship, I shouldn't say, like a boat, where you have multi-engine boat. And then you're up to, a cruiser. You're going to go up to something that's really, $1 million plus boat, easily, if not more. And then when you're up to the ship point, you're at a major level. Every business has a division. As you grow up, the ship actually itself gets bigger. And that's the same thing as having that ability to collectively put things together to grow the business. Is you can do that by leveraging the relationship that franchise or business opportunity, whatever, has with the person. So that's key. Now, here's another advantage to really, I'm going to stick to franchises right now. Financing. So if you go to finance your business, if anybody's ever dealt with the bank to get any kind of funding or financing your business, that they only fund and finance you when you don't need the money, unless you've got this thing called a tremendous business plan. I call it a tremendous business plan because you have to have incredibly good business plan of how you're going to repay the bank, what you're going to do, where the benchmarks are on how you're going to get there, where your goals are, and then, whatever capital you have in order to invest into that too as well to offset that. So if you're going to borrow $200,000 to start a franchise, you have to have something to borrow that against. Most people borrow it against their home. Dangerous thing to do, happens every day, but people do it. Some borrowed against their 401k, some borrowed against other things, but you can leverage the ability to get that loan. Here's a little teaser. It says SBA backed loan. Okay, the SBA stands for Small Business Administration. It's a federal funding source in order to give you the opportunity to gain capital from the government. The plus is most businesses are SBA approved. Very few are not. Now, before you start looking at this, you want to do your research. This is your homework, or what you call in business due diligence. This is crucial. Look at the success and fail rate of those SBA loans on each franchise. Look at the success and failure rate of each of these franchises that have been SBA backed in loans. You can get that information out there. It's very easy. Take you about 5 minutes to pull it up. When you're looking at a particular franchise, look how many of them default. The key word is default. If it defaulted, it went away. It was gone. It was a failure. It didn't succeed. It means that loan went into default and it was never paid back. And then the government gets the bill for that to offset that. It doesn't do good for anybody. So most franchises are SBA backed funding. That does not mean it's a great franchise. It does not mean it's a great opportunity for you. It doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. Because again, look at that failure and success rate. That's key when it comes to buying a franchise. I didn't even really think about that when I started to put this podcast together, but it's really important to look at those things. I know there's Franchise City on YouTube that really narrows it down to some very specific franchises themselves. They have way more experience than I do, but it could tell you that fail rate and that default rate. And when you're looking at something particular, you want to look at where they really go. Now, you will get some negative things about a franchisor online, some very justified, some very non-justified. So do your due diligence. I know that Franchise City on YouTube is very good. So due diligence is key to doing that. So it is easier to secure financing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's in your benefit to do it. Some of the disadvantages to a franchise. The biggest one, you don't own it. Are you crazy, man? Of course I own it. You sure about that? Yeah, man, I own it. You don't own it. You lease it. Okay. When you own something, you can sell it without asking anybody, without asking your wife, your family, your spouse, your dog, anybody, that you can sell it. When you sell a franchise, you have to get the franchise to approve the sale, which might go well and might not go well. But you don't own it. When you own it, you can take it. When you buy a franchise, you're leasing the business opportunity. You're leasing their name. It goes away if you go away. If you say one day, I don't want to have this franchise, I want to start Jim Bob's Restoration, I don't want to be Serve Pro anymore. Great. Free country. Do whatever you want. As long as you committed to your franchise agreement, you're at the end of your term and you want out, fine. You don't own those customers. You don't know anything about that anymore. Now they take over all your relationships that you haven't maybe secured. And I'm going to tell you, they can take them. They're going to take your phone numbers. They're going to take your email. They're going to take your website. They're going to take everything in your business that isn't nailed down because you don't own that name. You bought that name. So if you bought a Serve Pro, a Service Master, a Stanley Steamer for carpet cleaning, if you bought a Roto-Rooter, you don't own that. You never own that. You lease the name and you lease that system from them. So it's like leasing a car that you have to give back at some point. Unless you're going to take it to your retire, and even when you retire, you got to sell the business. The business goes to somebody else. You can't take that and bring it into your own company. And if you try it, you're probably going to lose, and you're going to lose miserable, and it's going to be one of the worst moments of your life, fighting the franchisor to try and keep what you have spent a lifetime, and a business definitely a lifetime, to build up. You don't own it. You lease it. So keep that in mind when you're buying something. You don't own it. You're leasing that opportunity. And even when you go to sell it, it is not guaranteed that they are going to find a suitable buyer for your franchise. All right. That's crucial. I've seen it time and time again. People think they got it and they get fed up one day of paying the royalties. And I hate this and I don't want to pay these royalties anymore. And I don't see an advantage and I don't get anything from the corporate office. I don't feel like I get as much help. I don't get jobs from them. They just suck. That's what people get to the point of doing. They get that point of frustration and burn where they can't justify it anymore. The thing is, when you buy it, you agree to the terms there. If you don't like the terms, don't sign the fuck up for it. I don't know how else to say it. Don't mess with it. Don't touch it. If you can't follow it. Now, when you go to look at a franchise, you're going to get this thing called a UFOC, or Uniform Franchise Offering Circular, or just an offering circular. FDD disclosure document. I think it's what they refer to it as today. An FDD will spell in a whole bunch of terms, similar to what one of those books are back there, what your commitments are to the franchisor and what your commitments are to the franchise themselves. So if you're the franchisor, it's going to tell you what you need to commit to them. And as a franchisee, you need to follow documents in that FDD. It's going to lay down all your commitments you have to make. It's going to lay down everything you have to do in order to make that successful, to make your contract with that franchisor complete. Don't mess with it. So I would suggest you get a lawyer. I would suggest you do your own little bit of a due diligence. I never am good at that word, due diligence. Take your time to do the research. Have your attorney a business attorney, not Uncle Bob that's done real estate stuff. Doesn't mean he's not qualified to look at some things, but Uncle Bob is not a business lawyer. Don't use Uncle Bob. Can cost you more than you can imagine because doesn't know what he's looking at. He looks at certain terms that he's used to from a legality standpoint from real estate, and some of the terms overlap and parallel each other. But that doesn't mean it's going to be any good to get your business advice from having him look at FDD. It has to be business attorney, and there's plenty of them out there that are fantastic. And they will tell you all the advantages, and you got to understand what you're buying and all the disadvantages of what you're not buying. So that's really the key. You have to make sure you can obligate to what's there. You'll notice me saying words, that's the key, 1,000 times. Remember those points of that's the key, because it really is crucial points if you're going to spend that kind of money. Speaking of money, franchise is expensive. To buy a franchise is not cheap. When a franchise is cheap, it's probably not very good. So a franchise says, we have the lowest cost. It's going to cost you a total of $10,000 to start this franchise. I'd run. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole unless that franchise requires nothing more than, your little tablet right here. And you got to build everything and you have almost no liability. You're only paying out portions of royalties on what you have that are small. If there's no real overhead, $10,000 might be acceptable. I've never seen a franchise anywhere near that to be something you can build. Something that's tangible, something has any value to it. So watch that, it's a cheap franchise. Nothing good is cheap and nothing cheap is good. That's the saying. It's been out for years, and it's served me well to realize that you have limitations when it comes to what you can expect out of a cheap franchise or cheap business opportunity. So that is those are some of the disadvantages to it. Business reputation, how is the franchisor reputation? Again, you do that diligence, go into Franchise City and check out, or you can always contact them. And I know they do research and they work with people that want to buy a franchise, and they tell you the advantages and disadvantages. And they also work with business opportunities and other things that aren't franchise related. So see the pluses and negatives to it. Understand your total costs. So here's a big one. When you buy this franchise, your total costs, startup costs, keyword, startup costs, are going to be $25,000. Wonderful. I got $25,000 and I am making money. No, your startup costs are $25,000. Your opening costs could be $200,000, but your startup costs could be $25,000. Your franchise fee might be financed by the franchisor. So if it's $25,000, they might finance it over 5 years. So you're paying, you're paying $5,000 a year. Well, that's great. But that's nothing in comparison to what you got to do as far as build out. If you're in a restaurant, it's a whole different animal. I'm just going to stick to service-based businesses because that's really where it's at from the people that are listening to this podcast. Know your total costs. Know the total cost and expense you're going to incur in order to get your door open and to run for your first 6 months minimum. Don't let anybody tell you you'll be opening your door and business will come into you immediately. There is no such business. Okay, I take it back. Maybe a McDonald's. Of course, you're going to pay millions and millions of dollars to open one and have to have an unbelievable reputation, both in creditworthiness and capital. I mean, you have to have millions in capital in order to buy one. So you're not going to get a return. The return is based on the investment that you put into it. So your business is going to take 6 months to do anything. And I'm not saying you're going to be profitable in 6 months. My first year in business was not profitable. Now, granted, I dumped money back into it. My franchise training in the past, working and running others, taught me to reinvest, especially in the beginning, in order to build it up. And that's why we are a multi-truck company very quickly and have a gaining reputation with plenty of followers and plenty of great reviews. There's a reason behind that, is because I put the money back into it and I continue to do it. And this year going into it, we're even going to invest more capital into it. So I don't plan to turn much of a profit even for this year or next year. But I do plan to at some point. It's just, this is why I want to do it. I wanted to scale the business. That was my desire from not just being me, myself, and I wanted to scale this thing. So in order to scale it, you got to grow and you got to reinvest into it. So realize your total cost. Now take those total costs and take it versus a independent startup, getting training from one of those sources I talked about in the beginning of the podcast, going and getting some kind of online training, going to a school, going to a seminar and getting that type of training. Put those costs into it. Now, when you're in a franchise, the reason franchises normally succeed versus independents is because of discipline. If you're a very disciplined person and will follow direction, like an ex-military member, franchises can be very good. That's why a lot of military veterans are very successful in franchises. They're very good at following through. They're very, very good at following orders and following procedures, what they call standard operating procedures, or SOPs in the military. They succeed very well. If you're that kind of person, you probably can also succeed independently because you're going to follow through. But if you're not the kind of person that will go out and seek out direction, if you're the kind of person that just wants to follow a system, look at a franchise. You might do very well with it. If you're not, you're creative and you're coming up with ideas and you want to be different, you want to be innovative, don't go in franchise route, because you're going to be very, very aggravated, upset, pissed off, whatever you want to call it. There's no real benefits to a person like that. I'm a creative person. I've created my entire life. When I left after 17 years, I've created everything since then. With marketing pieces, content, sales systems, marketing systems, whatever I had to do, right to designing things with no money, no budget, from scratch, with nothing to do it, to come up with ideas, all from, learning it out of your brain. If you're that kind of person, you're an entrepreneur. You're a true 100% God-given, very well hard-earned entrepreneur that is willing to put it all on the line based on your belief. If you're not that kind of person and you're good at following, franchising is a great idea. But weigh the pros and cons to both. We talked about it. We talked about what some of the good and the bad is in this podcast. I've only covered a few of these things. This is something that can go on for hours and hours and hours. And each section have different parts to it. But I want you to explore which one's better for you. In a service-based field, today, I think you can actually do very well as an independent in getting the right training, the right research, the right mentors, the right coaching. I think you do very well. If you're the type of person that could follow a system and they have a very good success rate versus a very good default rate, then a franchise could also be very good to you, and it's very good for resale value at the end of the day. But again, you don't own it, you lease it. One you own, one you lease. Only you could decide which one's best for you. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us on a brand new episode of Service Without Excuses podcast, episode number 6 of season 1. We will talk to you very, very soon. Have a great day.